democracy in Africa has failed. And why has it failed? Because it didn't have any, in context and in content, it's not African. It does not have any aspect of our culture.
So President Olusegun Obasanjo was recently at the birthday celebration of Right Honorable Ihedioha, where he repeated some of the lines that we've been talking about and some of us have been researching really about. And the fundamental question is democracy failing in Africa? And to that, Obasanjo answered that it is not only failing, that it is dying in Africa. And he began to make a number of arguments which I find interesting, and I wanted to share this with you.
It's an indication of your mind, of what you believe for this country. You have chosen for discussion democracy. Is it failing in Africa? Are we talking of democracy, or are we talking of Western liberal democracy? I will not preempt what Bishop Kuka will be saying. But when we talk of democracy, we should remember that in Africa, before the colonial rule and the colonial power, we have a form of government.
So Obasanjo started going to the rule. Remember, I had said the other day that it is actually fallacious. It's a short-sighted thinking to assume that Africa's history started when the colonial masters came. That Africa had been living its life for ages, for decades, even before the arrival of the white man. And therefore, that we need to find out what was Africa like in those days. What was the governance structure like? Did it deliver on its promise? What was system of life like then? And so that you must factor in all of those considerations and factor in the culture of the people before you talk about governance structure. And so he went right at the heart of it to say that we were self-governing individuals before the arrival of Western liberal democracy. He made a mention that there is a difference between Western democracy and democracy as it originated from Athens in Greece,
which attended to the needs of our people. And whatever you call it, to me, it is democracy. Because what is democracy about? The American President Abraham Lincoln defined it as government of the people, by the people, for the people. Democracy is meant to be a system of government that delivers, and delivers to all the people, not just a section of the people, not just a few. But what do we have today? I believe since we gone past the Greek democracy, which brought everybody to the square, and everybody has a say in the decision making, which affects everybody, or which affected everybody. Democracy has now become representative democracy. And representative democracy has not taken care of everybody. Today, we have democracy, which is government of small number of people, by a small number of people, over large number of people who are deprived of what they need to have in life.
See, when they tell you that democracy is about the freedom to choose, and that democracy is supposed to be the government of the people, you need to ask yourself, which people? And Obasanjo has aptly described what is happening in Africa as the government of a small number of people. For a small number of people, because every government actually benefits some people. But the question is, are you in that people? The government of President Muhammad Buhari benefited a small section of the people. No matter how hard we cry, the government of Tinubu is benefiting a small number of people. So he said that the government system of Africa is a government of the small number of the people, for the small number of people, over the large section of people who are usually disgruntled and denied from the basic promises of democracy. And he went on to argue that we have to redefine it. Keep listening.
Now, that is not democracy that will endure. So if you are talking of democracy failing in Africa, democracy in Africa has failed. And why has it failed? Because it didn't have any, in context and in content, it's not African. It does not have any aspect of our culture, our way of life, what we stand for, what we believe, Ubuntu.
What he's saying is that before you design the governance structure of any nation, you must pay consideration to the way of life of those people, how they think, how they talk, how they act. Because when you have a feudal culture, a culture where people defer to the elders, and that's what we have in Africa, make no mistake about it. And it helped us to organize our society because there's a hierarchical system. Although you don't want it to be oppressive, but it should be hierarchical. And in that hierarchical system, people defer to others. And it is that deference that you're seeing in the Senate today. You see, democracy, like I keep mentioning, is premised that there will be power distribution. Why should there be power distribution? They said power is too raw to be concentrated in the hands of one man. If that is a problem, then their solution is to disintegrate this power and distribute it to different power nodes. All right? Let the president hold a certain fraction of power. Let the Senate or the legislative body hold a certain fraction. And let the judiciary hold a certain fraction. So they have distributed power into the three different entities. But because you are distributing power in a feudalistic society, you are distributing power in a society that defers to people, then all those people you have given a portion of power. For instance, today, Ababio Senate has a portion. The House of Representatives have a portion. But they gather their portion and submit it at the feet of the president because of the culture. The judiciary has a fraction, but they all take that and submit it to one man. In the states, you also have that the states or the different subnational governments have state houses of assembly. But the state houses of assembly take their powers and submit it to the government, the governor. The judiciary take their powers and submit it to the governor. And that's why you don't hardly see independent judicial decisions or independent legislative decisions. It is all rooted in culture. So when you are designing a governance system for any culture, you must have in mind is if you have the highest person in authority, how do the others respond to that person? If they respond by deferring, then even if you remove the power and give this person will carry his power willingly and go and give back. And so you have a system that is supposed to be distributed powers, and then it does not give you that distributed powers. So you are designing a system to achieve a purpose, but this culture does not allow it. So how do you respond? Obasanjo answered,
I am because we are. It is, I am because I can grab. What sort of democracy brings you and you grab everything and then illegally corruptly, and you say, go to court. When you know that even in the court, you cannot get justice.
You can't get justice in court because the man in court has taken his power and given to the president. In the legal system, in the laws as it is designed, the judge, the Supreme Court justice, is supposed to have power independent of the president. It is guaranteed by the Constitution, but in operation, they always defer to the strongest man. And that is what you call democracy. And that is why it is failing in Africa. Keep listening.
So if democracy is not that democracy is failing, democracy is dying. And if we are going to make democracy not to die, we have to look at democracy in the context and in the content of Africa.
Obasanjo was charitable by saying that democracy is dying in Africa. If you leave it to me, democracy is dead in Africa. And the discussion is, how do we bury the carcass? That's it. What is democracy supposed to offer you? Is it not good governance? Because the premise of democracy is that when the majority are allowed to choose, but you've seen in your system that the majority are not allowed to choose, that choice will bring about electricity, that choice will bring about security, that choice will bring about food on the table, that choice will bring about development. But you have seen, for instance, in Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, he was the leader for almost a period of 50 years. In other climes, as you see in, for instance, the whole of the Middle East, you see that the tenure of the president or of the leader, they don't even call it president, is an extended mandate. It was Walter Lippmann who accused democracy of being unsure of itself. He said that rigidity, which by the mere movement of the calendar throws an official out of office in the midst of his work or compels him to go campaigning, is merely the crude method of a democracy without confidence in itself. So you say that we have the power to choose, and therefore when we choose, we are supposed to get all the dividends of democracy. But we are looking at our neighbors who you say that they don't have the power to choose. And we have seen the progresses of Saudi Arabia and the whole of the Middle East in the last 50 years. We've seen the whole Asia and their progress in the last 50 years. And you say we have freedom. But everything that happens in dictatorship happens here. The media is not at liberty to say what they want to say. The courts are not at liberty. There's no freedom in the legislative house. The citizens are not at liberty to choose. Why then do you keep calling it democracy? If indeed democracy is as advertised, why is it unsure of itself, as Walter Lippmann asked? Since if democracy is the best form of government, why does it keep throwing people out every 4 years? And believe me, there can never be sustainable development if you keep having development truncated after every 4 years. The developmental trajectory of nations is in such a way that you can't make substantial progress in 4 or 8 years. Now close your eyes and imagine, for instance, in Anambra State, if P2B had been allowed to continue presiding over the affairs of Anambra State, close your eyes and imagine where Anambra State will be today. Close your eyes and imagine where Nigeria would have been today if Obasanjo were allowed to keep superintending over Nigeria with all the debt cancellations and the 6 or 7% that the GDP was growing as at the time. Now, in retrospect, close your eyes and imagine that Lee Kuan Yew was thrown out of office after 4 years. What would have happened to Singapore? Close your eyes and see if the people that developed China were being thrown away out of office after every 4 or 8 years, or at least being forced to campaign. Walter Lippmann says that democracy is unsure of itself because it throws people out of the office by mere rotation of the calendar, whether or not their work is done, or force them to go campaigning. He says this kind of system is unsure of itself. And where Africa is, we need to have a stable government. Let's argue about stability for a while. Because when you look at what is happening in the United Kingdom, of course, the United Kingdom can afford to throw away prime ministers after every 4 months. Now, that's an exaggeration, but I hope you got the point. But they can afford it because there is a system. And then they have gotten so big that even that system is affecting them. But yet, imagine if a country in Africa spews out prime ministers the way the UK system spews out prime ministers. How are you able to attract foreign investments? How are you able to guarantee the stability of the economy? So they can afford it. They can make those. America can afford to change their president every 4 or 8 years. No wahala. But the kind of investments Africa needs, the investors need to see that there is a stability in government policy. There is a tenured state of government policy and not just short-termism. Have you noticed that after 2 years, investors stop investing because they are not sure that the person there will win the second term? Or they are not sure, so they keep it. And then this not knowing what will happen, this unpredictability, this discontinuity robs us of a lot of the things that would have happened if we had a more stable system of government. A time will come when Africa will evolve. But today, either you get Africans to question, to throw away their culture of thousands of years. Because without us throwing away that culture, democracy will not work. So either you get us to throw away that culture, or you throw away the system of government and get us a system of government adapted, well adapted to our current system of life. And when we have educated ourselves to the point where we say, okay, and when we now have the baseline finances to where we can now say, okay, then we can now bring back democracy. All the countries that have made progress between the last 50 or indeed the last 100 years, none of them use democratic system. As at the time America started their experimentation with democracy, as at that time, Europe, where they were coming out from, has achieved a level of civilization and growth. And that was what helped them. But even before Europe, from where they plucked out that branch from, even before they got to the system of democracy, they used monarchies and tenured governments to stabilize and to bring their people to the point where democracy can now work for them. Africa has to rethink its governance systems. This system that was imposed on us, and we keep defending with our life. Every time you see people saying we are fighting for democracy, you ask yourself, what has it given you? Chinese people are not enjoying democracy. Are you more free than they are? Middle East are not enjoying more democracy, but our people are running to Dubai and all of those places every day to look for work. If we don't take time, people will start immigrating from here and start looking for visa to go to Burkina Faso. Yes, you say they don't have the ability to choose. You that have the ability to choose, your choice has resulted in Boko Haram. Your choice keeps resulting in insecurity. Your choice keeps resulting in poverty. Your choice keeps resulting in no health care. What is the choice about? What is that choice about? Let us listen to the concluding statement of Olusegun Obasanjo.
I hope that we will get to that stage so that democracy, which will deliver, will be the democracy that we will have in Africa. Thank you.
You see, until Africa redefines its governance structures, that morning we talk about is at hand. But we have to question and own our own assumptions, redesign our system. And by the way, when Obasanjo is speaking, this man is not speaking from the theoretical part of government. He has been a military dictator and he's been a civilian president. Not only that, he has gone around and is consulting with governments all over the world. And he's a critical thinker. He's just a little bit short of being a philosopher. And he's telling you, I have looked at this thing, that this nation cannot make progress if we keep this short term throwing out presidents every 4 years, every 8 years. And you are told, By the way, when you see and you talk of democracy as the intervention of the people, the question philosophers asked and Walter Lippmann answered it is that intervention consistent or is it an occasional intervention? When democracy tells you that you have the power to choose, the question is, what are you really choosing? Because the democracy you have presents only 2 or 3 people to you. And that presentation is once in 4 years. Throughout the 4 years, whatever they do in office, they don't call you to decide. So you need to talk about occasional intervention of the masses, occasional intervention of the public, and then the consistent, which is the idea people have, that they keep choosing, that they keep choosing. No, you don't keep choosing. You make occasional choices where you are allowed to make that choice, where INEC does not truncate that choice. Well, we'll continue on this thread in our next video, so make sure to like this video, share it, and subscribe. My name is Chima Christian. Africa's morning is at hand.